This is Geoffrey Hinton, the man often called the godfather of AI. In 2016, he looked at radiology and said,
"People should stop training radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that within 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists."
He was so sure, and he had every reason to be. The AI worked. That was a decade ago. Today, there are more radiologists than ever, and they're earning more than they ever have. This is nothing new. We've been having the same argument for 200 years. Every time a new technology shows up, someone says the jobs are doomed, and every time, they've been wrong. The jobs always came back, albeit often in a different form. Even now, the people making the new technology can't make up their minds. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, spent years saying that most jobs were going to go away.
One of the things that I struggle with, like getting out of the bed every morning, is that like my job is to help people destroy jobs. The job destruction that we're going to see by, software in the next couple of decades, I don't think anyone's prepared for, and you can't talk about it.
This year, he said he's delighted to be wrong. His rival Dario warned of a similar white-collar bloodbath.
We may indeed have a serious employment crisis on our hands.
Then quietly softened it. So I stopped listening to the predictions and looked at the patterns myself. And as I dug deeper, I came to a different conclusion. Geoffrey Hinton may not have been wrong. He may have just been early. And if I'm right, then this video isn't just about radiologists. It's a story about your job too. In the early 1800s, clothing was expensive. Most people only had 2 sets of clothes, their everyday wear and their Sunday best for when they go to church. The clothes were handmade by textile workers, and they earned a very comfortable living, well beyond that of a common laborer. But it didn't last. The Industrial Revolution brought the power loom, technology that automated the textile workers' jobs, and it was becoming mainstream. By 1830, the wage of the workers had dropped 80%. The same work before a fraction of the pay in a single lifetime. The workers fought back. This was the era of the Luddites, the ones who resisted change and smashed the machines to save their trade. But here's the strange part. As these workers disappeared, the industry exploded. The technology made cloth so cheap that everybody started buying more of it. Look at your closet now. You probably have more than 2 outfits in there. This is Jevons paradox. Make something cheaper and people don't use less of it. They use more. So as demand for these new, cheaper clothes ramped up, the need for loom operators increased as well, leading to an overall employment boom in the textile industry. The original textile worker jobs died, but the industry grew, so more people work with cloth than ever before. This didn't just happen with textiles. During the Industrial Revolution, the same logic spread across the whole economy. Factories decreased the cost of almost everything and increased the number of jobs. Entire towns grew up around them. For the first time in history, millions of people had steady paying work in manufacturing. It built the middle class. The factory job became the job, the thing you could raise an entire family on, thanks to new technology and automation. But the factory floor was only half the story, because a company making 1,000 times more goods needed something else. People to manage all of it. For every worker on the line, you needed someone who never touched the product. Clerks, accountants, and managers. This was the birth of the office, the white-collar job. Over the next century, that's where the jobs went. Off the factory floor and into work that was less about your hands and more about your head. But every machine so far still needed a human to run it. So here's the real test. What happens when a machine doesn't need an operator at all and does the whole job? In the 1980s, ATMs, automated teller machines, were spreading fast. ATMs were different in that you didn't need a human present for the machine to work. The machine would do exactly what a bank teller did. Hand out cash, take deposits, and keep a record of the client's balance. The world thought that the role of the teller was going away. So what actually happened to the number of tellers? It went up. In America, there were about 485,000 tellers in the mid-80s, and this rose to around 600,000 by 2008, while the number of ATMs went from 100,000 to 400,000. ATMs made opening new locations more cost-effective, so banks were able to reach more customers, and as a result, more tellers were needed. It's happening right now with radiology, the job that Hinton said was finished. AI can read scans today, and yet there are more radiologists than ever, with a growing shortage. So that settles the argument, right? With AI automating tasks, while some jobs may disappear, like the textile worker, automation usually results in a gain of jobs overall. Except, something doesn't add up. Because if that's true, where are all the loom operators, factory workers, and bank tellers today? Remember that bank teller graph from earlier? Well, I have something to admit. I didn't show you the whole thing. The number of tellers peaked around 2008, and since then, it's been cut nearly in half, and it's projected to keep falling. What happened? Well, when's the last time you've walked into a bank? It's been years for me. All of my banking now is done on my phone. With electronic banking, deposits, transfers, and almost everything banking related can be done from your couch. E-banking is good enough to remove most of the reasons you'd ever walk into a bank. And once that happened, the bank stopped needing as many people to help customers when they walk through the door. It's still automation, just done better the second time around, 20 years later. This is the standard shape of a job's lifecycle. The work starts off as niche with a few workers, the market then opens up, which brings in more people, it peaks, then starts to fall off, making an inverted U shape. And once the job is no longer required, it disappears. Now, you might be thinking that factory jobs are a different story. Those got shipped overseas. And you're right, a lot of them did. But here's what doesn't fit. Production in the US didn't go down when those jobs left. It went up. They make more stuff with far fewer people doing it. And if it was just about cheap labor overseas, then those jobs should be somewhere else. So, China? China's manufacturing workforce peaked in the 2010s and it's been shrinking ever since. Even China is automating now, and they've become some of the best in the world at it. BYD, a Chinese car company, has factories that are able to run completely in the dark. The jobs didn't just relocate, they disappeared. So why does this keep happening? The same inverted U shape in industry after industry. Markets follow something called an S-curve. When a market is new, adoption starts off slow. Then something kicks it into rapid takeoff, usually a drop in price like with cloth and goods during the Industrial Revolution, and everybody piles in fighting for that market share. But it doesn't climb forever. Eventually, the market saturates, demand flattens, and everyone who's going to buy it already has it. Future sales are usually replacements or upgrades. Now overlay that with our inverted U-curve and look at where all the jobs are. The good years, the hiring years, all happen during the takeoff while demand is still rising. So what happens at the top? Why do the jobs disappear instead of staying flat when the markets start to saturate? I can't say for sure in every situation, but generally it's better technology and better automation. With cloth and textiles, the power loom brought them in. Then with new technology like the airjet loom, it pushed them back out. With automobiles, Henry Ford's assembly line increased the number of workers. Now with most people owning cars and factories running themselves, those jobs have left. Business is a money-making game, so when a market approaches saturation, the obvious way to make more money is to reduce costs. So much of the time, that means to reduce labor. What about radiologists then? Hinton was right about the technology. The AI works and has for years. So why is it that we need more radiologists now than ever before? We're still at this part of the S-graph for radiology. The same place the bank tellers were in the 1990s, before electronic banking took over the industry. And it's still climbing for two reasons. The first is Jevons paradox, which we touched on earlier in the video. When something gets cheaper or more efficient, we don't use less, we use more. It happened when hospitals went digital in the 2000s. The turnaround times dropped and imaging jumped 60% in under a decade. AI is the newest version of that. It's not shrinking the pile of work, it's helping clear the pile that keeps getting bigger. The second reason is simpler. People are getting older and an aging population needs more scans. More of everything really, but there aren't enough radiologists to keep up. This can't last forever. So what's holding radiology back from hitting the peak? Again, there are two things. The first is technology. While AI is already here, it's useful to remember that we're at the beginning of the AI revolution. If we compare it to the Industrial Revolution, we're just past the invention of the steam engine. Now, back to bank tellers. The teller didn't disappear when the ATM showed up. They just stopped being the person who only counted your cash and started doing other things as well. The same thing's happening here. The radiologists still exist, but their role is transforming. The radiologist version of electronic banking isn't here yet. Or is it? Because that might not be the whole story. In business and jobs, security comes in the form of something called a moat. A reason other people can't just come in, copy you, and take your market share. For example, YouTube's moat is that everyone's already there. The creators are there because that's where the viewers are. The viewers are there because that's where the creators are. A competitor with better technology can't just walk in. They'd have to pull both sides over at once, and that's a hard thing to do. For a company like Apple, their moat is their design, manufacturing, and ecosystem. In the case of medicine and radiology, the moat is regulation. The reason why you and I can't go and buy an X-ray machine and use AI to diagnose people is the law. A human professional is legally required to sign off. Not because machines can't do it, but because the rules say a person has to. A regulatory moat is what stands between the technology and the job. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the people who'd benefit the most from tearing that moat apart. The CEO of the largest public hospital system in America, Mitchell Katz, said this out loud in public. We could replace a great deal of radiologists with AI at this moment if we are ready to do the regulatory challenge. He's saying the technology is ready right now, and the only thing in his way are the regulations. Here's the problem with regulatory moats. They make the people inside feel safe, and they act as though the moat is permanent, but it's not. Even if the rules don't change, that defense can be penetrated. Think about taxis. For decades, to drive one in New York, you needed a medallion, a little metal plate that the city handed out, and they almost never made more of it. They were so rare that they sold for over $1 million each. That was the moat. You couldn't compete with cab drivers because you literally weren't allowed to. But then Uber showed up, and Uber didn't fight the medallion. They didn't try to buy one or change the law. It just offered something cheaper and easier. Tap a phone, a car comes, and let the public decide. And the public decided fast. By the time regulators caught up, the workaround was mainstream. The rules didn't stop it. Uber had found a way around the moat, and those multi-million-dollar medallions, they became nearly worthless. And that's how the moats actually fall. Someone finds a way around it that's cheaper and easier, regular people prefer it, and the regulation reshapes itself to match what's already happening. With AI, it's happening right now, in real time. Self-driving cars have their own moat they need to cross: liability. Who's responsible for when the car crashes, and other edge cases? That question alone has kept human hands on the wheel for over a decade. Everywhere except for the few cities where regulators have allowed it. And in those pockets, the cars are already driving themselves. And in 2026, BYD walked up to that liability moat and said, "We'll cover the damages. If our system causes the crash, we'll take responsibility." It's limited to China only, a 1-year test with conditions, but someone's challenging it, and this is what the first crack looks like. BYD decided that the liability moat was a business problem, and they're trying to buy their way through it. So long as the profits offset the damages, then the math works. And if this moat gets crossed, millions of transportation jobs across the world are suddenly threatened. Now look back at radiology's moat. It's the same kind of wall. A human signs off because the law and the lawsuit needs a human to blame. The cheaper, easier path already exists. The machines can read the scan, and the people who'd save the money, the hospital CEOs, are already standing at the moat waiting for a bridge. All it takes is for someone to try and for people to want it. And with AI being so disruptive, the moat isn't the same kind of protection anymore. It's a delay. And that delay is why I think Hinton wasn't wrong about radiology. He was just early. So if new technology always catches up to jobs, maybe the question was never which jobs are safe. Maybe it's when is a human actually needed and why? I stopped looking at the jobs themselves and started looking at the patterns in the industries. Every story we've seen so far has a clear one. The jobs exist when market growth has a human-shaped bottleneck. In the early 1800s, the bottleneck on people buying more clothes was price. The power loom brought that price down, and the bottleneck shifted over to production, which at the time was human-shaped. That's why the jobs exploded, not because the work mattered more, but because more people were required for there to be more product. This also created new bottlenecks downstream, which created the white-collar jobs. And then the machines got good enough to run without us, and the humans stopped being the bottleneck at production, and those jobs left, while the industry kept growing. That's the whole pattern. New technology comes in and shifts the bottleneck. As long as there's a human-shaped bottleneck, then there will be jobs. Now let's look at radiology again with that in mind. If we believe Mitchell Katz, the bottleneck isn't the technology. The machines can already do the work. It's a regulation that's forcing a human-shaped bottleneck, and we know that isn't the best defense. Here's an argument that we keep running into. New jobs always show up. Jobs you couldn't have imagined, like software engineer when the calculator came around. And for 200 years, that's been true. But there is one worker that didn't save. There were millions of horses employed in America. Then the car arrived, and demand for transportation didn't shrink, it went through the roof. There were new industries everywhere. But the horse wasn't the one doing the new work. There was no longer a horse-shaped bottleneck. Unlike the horse, we could climb off the farm, off the factory floor, and into work that was about your head instead of your hands. And there was always a higher floor to escape to because the machines were narrow and the cognitive floor was out of their reach. AI is different. It's the first machine that reaches into cognitive work at this level. Not all of it, not yet, and maybe not ever, but it's already enough to start shifting the bottleneck around in industries like software engineering. So the job is the same as it's always been. When one bottleneck closes, a new one opens up somewhere else. Find it and move to it before everyone else does. Because here's the part that makes this era, the AI revolution, different from the rest. In the physical world, demand has a ceiling. Everyone eventually has enough clothes, enough cars, and the work tapers off no matter what. But in the digital world, is there truly a ceiling on the lines of code that need to get written? On the compute needed for AI? Or on the power required to run the data centers? If there is, it's probably past our lifetime and we'll have other problems to deal with then. So that's likely where the new bottlenecks form, in industries where demand never fills. And we're seeing that now with increased demand for electricians and plumbers to build data centers and power stations. Looking back at jobs through the Industrial Revolution, the pattern's the same that it's always been. New technology comes in and disrupts markets. The jobs shift around and the opportunities go to who's ready to take them. Keep an eye out for where the human-shaped bottlenecks are, because that's where the new jobs are going to be. This whole video was about what companies do when there's money on the table. If you want to see how dark that gets when the product is designed to hook kids, that's this video here. Thank you for watching.